You're watching Analysts After Dark, an underground hideaway where insatiably curious analysts examine provocative project problems, share salacious secrets, and establish a covert network of co-conspirators. Step into the dark with your hosts, AJ Hawley and Steve Jones.
Well, hello, Mr. Jones. How are you?
Hello. I am fantastic. How are you, AJ?
Doing great. So we have a fun show today. We'll be talking about change and shift. So if you haven't noticed, I'm in a different location. So I've shifted to a new spot momentarily. And this is all real. It's not like a green screen or anything like that. It's all, it's real stuff. But
And I'm virtual.
That's okay. But I think it's one of those things that you understand a little bit more about how comfortable you are in the setup that you have and all of the nuances and the ergonomics that you've got at your desk when you sit at your desk. And then when you go to somebody else's, oh, this is all a little bit different, So it's been, I think, the perfect scenario for talking to our guest today. But before we get there, what's new with you, Steve? What's going on?
Well, we have a new change as well. So we got a new rescue dog, and she's amazing.
Oh, good.
But just like a changed environment, there's a lot to deal with. And it's not just little things like getting the dog dishes and dog beds, blankets,
right.
New tags. There's also a lot of mental things that the rest of the family has to deal with too, and the other little dog that we have. Right. So there's a lot of change going on, and are we ready? I love dogs.
I don't know.
So.
How's it working out so far?
So far, really good. She is a sweet dog. So getting the two dogs to play nice together. So far they've been a little bit separate, but at least there's not been any real conflict. So that helps things, makes it easier.
Wonderful. Well, I know that's always a struggle, especially with another dog too. So bring that into the equation and trying to figure out how the new team's going to work, right? But that's, I think, normal for any team, right? Anytime that you add somebody to a team or remove somebody from a team, you go through those forming, storming, norming, and performing stages, right?
Absolutely. And so it takes a different energy too.
Right.
You need to be ready physically, you need to be ready mentally, and being a dog person, it helps, but it's a different energy and means you need to be more intentional.
Well, I'm excited for our guest today. You actually met Amy first, I believe, right?
At BA World in Toronto. It was my first trip to Toronto, and hers was one of the first sessions I went to, and I thought it was fantastic. So when I saw Amy at one of the breaks, I approached her and said, "You should be on our show." I was shameless.
Well, I got a chance to meet her as well, her and her husband Rob, in Orlando, and had a great time. So we've had phenomenal conversation around change, what she does. She's super passionate about what she does, and it's always interesting talking to people in the change management role about how they're passionate about change. And then I've worked with some people that are in change management, but also personally don't like change. So they don't appreciate it in their own life, but that's what they do all day, right?
So you're saying they're both the immovable object and the unstoppable force in one?
That's correct. Yeah.
Excellent.
And they're their own paradox of existence. Yeah, for sure. But well, let's go ahead and bring on Amy Yackowski. So Amy, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you being here.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, for having me. I am thrilled to be here as well on what I hear is the most popular and talked about show that happens at 8 p.m. all about analysts. And
correct.
A little bit of imbibing.
and is also titled Analysts After Dark. Yes.
Yeah.
All of those things are
Yes.
true
Yes.
collectively.
Collectively.
Right.
Using the and.
Right. Inclusive and for all of it, for sure. Well, if you don't know Amy Yackowski is passionate about change. In her almost 20 years in the staffing industry, wearing hats in operations, training, project management, and software development, Amy has seen changes of many sizes, systems, and degrees of success. Experiencing firsthand the struggles well-intended organizations encountered on their change journeys, Amy saw an opportunity to help reshape the narrative that change sucks and people make it hard. Through painted porch strategies, phase zero change readiness programs, change readiness, programs, audits, and toolkits, and advisory, Amy and her amazing team of experts are on a mission to better prepare learners, leaders, teams, and organizations to realize successful change and adapt with agility when shift hits the fan.
Well done. I should have put that in ChatGPT and shortened it up a little bit. Brevity is not always my strong suit, but thank you, AJ, for that lovely introduction.
It's thorough. Nothing wrong with thorough.
The last part is the hardest one because you have to really pronounce that F in shift because know there's so much muscle memory in different phrases that you may say during the course of the day. So but I like shift
especially when you're talking about change.
Right.
Because that stuff happens
sometimes is the afterthought. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Both happen at any given
The
time.
F usually comes out separately, in other words.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us a little bit about how you went from the staffing industry and then into change management, and then also maybe do those ideas correlate even as two industries?
They do. I'll start back when I was 4. No, I'm kidding. So really where all this came about was my background, as you so kindly mentioned that I wrote for you and you read exceptionally well. My background for the past 20 years has been in staffing and primarily healthcare staffing. I've mainly served on the software side of the business through a couple different applicant tracking systems and CRMs. And in those different roles that I was in, either as a trainer, as a consultant, or as a product designer, I kept seeing these same patterns happen over and over again, where we would go into these organizations who were going to embark on these massive transformations, usually digitally driven, hence why I was there. They were going on these massive endeavors, and we would regularly, for months and months on end, every other week, it seemed, put all of ourselves in a room for 5 days and try to brainstorm what the future is going to look like. And all of these people were extremely intelligent. They were good at their job. I like to say they were the SME of SMEs. And yet we kept running into barriers and resistance to this idea of doing something different. We very much, and I'm sure that you have seen this in many different realms, but I kept seeing where they were just trying to take what they were already doing today and upgrade the software of where they did it. And as you know, that is something that is extremely difficult. In fact, it's nearly impossible to do. And while you think you might be going through an upgrade because you're going to have like the coolest tech that you're going to start using, you often find that it ends up slowing you down because you're trying to do the exact same thing in the exact same way in a completely different system. And then at the end of the day, the implementation partner sucks, the software sucks, the change sucks, everybody sucks. Like, this is just the worst thing that we just spent the last year plus trying to make happen. And everybody was just like, are we done yet? Can we just move on, please? And I said, gosh, you know what? Number one, first off, I had to do a little bit of introspection like Taylor Swift and ask myself, is it me? Am I the problem? Because I am one of the singular through points through all of these activities. I had to get real honest with myself. And I said, you know what? There's probably a part of that. Yes, I know that I am not, I can play a role here, but I think it's because there's this gap. There's this piece that is missing in all of these endeavors, which is this idea of getting ready for what's next. Not assembling your people, throwing them in a room, and then hoping for the best that they all work together and plan and design something new. It's actually going a little bit deeper earlier in what I like to call phase zero, getting these people and your processes primed, clear, prepared, and ready to then embark on this big journey of change that you're going through.
So introducing new changes in software and processes when it's done isn't good enough?
No, that's actually not the recommended path. I like to think of it as we can, think about healthcare, there's one of two ways that we can try to take care of ourselves. We can treat the disease, or we can try to prevent and be well, so that way the disease doesn't hopefully appear for us. We're doing preventative medicine, preventative work, so that way once we do embark on this change, it's not something that we are then trying to literally and figuratively triage and address in the moment when emotions are high, budgets are tight, timelines are encroaching, and we have to just get it done.
I think that's a third option in that too, in the healthcare realm. You just live your life as you want to, and then hope that science comes up with a solution before you actually have any of those issues, right? So
Yeah.
like
Yeah, for
right
sure.
now they just passed a thing where you can grow new teeth and they're trying that out, right? So then all the candy and gumdrops that you want, eat all the gum and it's fine. You're okay because we can just grow new
Yeah.
teeth.
Solid. I like that.
Right. Yeah.
Solid
So option
recommendation.
3 is just
Mhm.
change avoidance.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Isn't that what a lot of companies do anyway?
I think so.
But they spend money on upgrades, but they don't want to change.
Yes.
Yeah. Amy, you hit
And
on
I would
something.
say bless their hearts, but yes.
You hit on something near and dear to my heart only because I live and breathe it all the time. What you're talking about, organizations want to take an application exactly as it is and port it into a new application. So
Yeah.
it's lift and shift. And
Mhm.
oftentimes in that case, I don't pronounce the F in shift because it's exactly that process every single time. You're not going to get that out of the system because you have to go in, analyze those processes, figure out how do we do this in the new space. Is this even the same process that we had to do this before in the system? Is this the same process that we need to do? Do we even have to do it? Is there ways to automate it? And if we don't have that analysis, I don't think that we have a good opportunity to make successful changes in big applications like that.
Yeah, I agree. I think if I had a time machine and I could go back in time to whoever coined that term, I would give him a very swift slap in the face and say, "Really?"
Yeah.
Because it doesn't exist. You're exactly right. I don't think there ever truly has been a lift and shift in any
Right.
realm of our lives or our work where we can just, unplug one and insert another and everything is coming up roses. That's
Yep.
not how it works. Not at all. And so often in organizations, they view the technology as both the savior and the struggle within what is either going to help them shoot into the next level of success or that's holding them back. And while that is partially true, as a technologist, I always say I am not anti-tech. I'm just saying tech is not your first solution, it's your last solution. And in many cases what happens is that tech does not resolve, tech reveals. Tech reveals all of the underlying ills and inefficiencies and operational workarounds that you have within your processes and within your business.
I
Like
consulted
that.
at a company at one point that had a CRM system, but several of the analysts kept maintaining different customer contacts in spreadsheets, and their process at least once or twice a year was to reach out and say, "Are you still the contact for this? Are you still the contact for this?" And I'm not talking years in the past. some have been a little more recent than that.
Mhm.
And you just can't get people to change their habits even when they're stupid.
The habits,
Well,
right?
well, they are habits. One of the things I think, Steve, you heard me when I gave my talk about change and change readiness, is that there is this notion of people don't want to change. People don't like it. They stick their heels in. They dig their heels in. They cross their arms. They're like, nope, not
Yep.
for me.
This is
And
how we do
the
it.
truth is that that's how it appears on the outside.
Mm-hmm.
But really, there's something much deeper that is going on the inside, that is simply the manifestation of. So change itself is an event. It's a thing that happens, whether it's a new technology, a new boss, a new team, a new job, whatever that is change. But really where transformation actually happens is in this transition. The transition shifting from something current or known to something new and unknown and untested. And that is very much a human, emotional, psychological process that is happening and that cannot be seen. And so we naturally think, oh, that's just Karen. She's difficult and she doesn't like change. Well, no, Karen probably has some very legitimate reasons or justifications for why she doesn't yet feel confident or comfortable in the change that is often just being thrust upon her a week and a half before you're supposed to go live. And actually, Karen is a great resource if you want to try to get ahead of those shifts that inevitably are going to hit the fan once you flip that switch. She's going to be a great ally to talk to because she will tell you the things that you probably have not thought about, the alternative paths or errors that could occur because of you haven't done the amount of training or preparation for it.
I have fun trying to find the biggest opponent or the biggest thorn. Usually every team knows who that most knowledgeable SME is that is typically most hesitant. I seek them out because, like you said, they have the knowledge.
Yes.
So pick their brain, find out what the challenges are, and find a way to get them to a place of acceptance of this change makes it so much better.
Yeah. Now there's a certain percentage, probably 5 to 10% of any organization, of any population, who are just pain in the ass, sticks in the mud. And
Dissenters.
you could spend months or years trying to convince them and it will not happen. However, they're a small percentage. You still want to have conversations with them. I love that you intentionally seek them out, Steve, because you'll get a lot of great information. Some of it you'll take with you and some of it you go, well, thanks for that. I'll keep that in mind. But if you can get the majority of those resistors, the people that aren't the extreme, the, stubborn of stubborn, but the people that are, change curious, as I like to say, they're like, well, I don't know yet. Convince me. If you can get those people on your team, man, it is going to help your change be so much more successful than had you just stuck with your biggest change cheerleaders and proponents.
So, Amy, when you have those people that are leading the change or helping lead the change, the shifts, if you will, do you call them shift heads or what do you refer to them as?
Ooh, no, but I'm writing that one down.
All right.
I like that.
It's coined here first, everyone. Just so you know, I get royalties on that, and that's.
You're my number one shift head.
I'm going to write that one down. I like to call them ambassadors. But
Oh, okay.
I like shift heads as well. I'm a fan of that. I think Leslie agrees. She's going to start using it too.
Yeah,
you better get on that. You better start trademarking that one, like ASAP.
I think as we go through these things, that's my favorite thing to do is to figure out how's there a play on words on whatever it is that we're doing. and it's one of my, I don't know,
Talents.
fun habits.
It's one of your superpowers.
That's one of my fun habits. So it does get me in trouble sometimes and has in the past, but it's fine. Whatever.
Lean into it. Own your
Yeah.
superpowers, man. Don't let anybody dim your light.
I like that. That's two good ones. I'll post quotes after this, but that's another great quote.
I was going to say, so I'll just add another little nugget here from the analyst perspective. What as an analyst can you do, especially when you're encountering individuals or even whole teams that seem to be resistant to this change, who are simply trying to reinvent the wheel? I will say, as analysts, don't shortchange your power and your influence that you have in any encounter or any workshop that you are a part of or that you are running. You in fact, I think, are some of the most critical pieces beyond capturing and documenting the what is, or facilitating a conversation of what's possible. But you have such a huge impact in helping to connect that bridge from the past and the present to the future that I think is often overlooked as analysts. We think, you know what, I'm just here to get requirements and to document process flows, and then, it's somebody else, someone else will take it over from here. But you have such a unique opportunity. And actually, you are probably one of the few people in the entire organization who understands the entire organization's operations, that you can very much lean into and be an ally and a source of influence and trust and advisement beyond, I believe, what you may think you can do today as just an analyst on the project.
I feel better already. I don't think of myself as just an analyst, but I feel better already.
Well, good. Because I don't want everyone to think like I'm not a leader. You are a leader in so many ways.
Well, I think you're right. I think that BAs do a great job of understanding not only their role, but just kind of being in everyone's shoes. So they're talking to business stakeholders, they're talking to developers, project managers, to leaders, right? So they see it from multiple angles, and just being elbow and elbow with your change manager, change management person is one of the things to me has always been successful. There's a friend that I made on a consulting project that I was on, and she's good. She was the change manager, and we had a couple of conversations around, is it just me, or just like you're mentioning earlier, and like, oh, thank God. And so you were able to look at that person and kind of have a sounding board for that, which I think it goes both ways, right? So you help them with, here are all the things that are happening, ideas for readiness overall, but then they help you kind of coach and navigate some of those influential conversations that you were just mentioning.
Yeah, they're definitely your eyes and ears. What is happening in the trenches? First and foremost, I just got to say, I love the fact that you actually had a change manager on a project that you were on. I think that's one thing to call out, that it's not as common as you believe, or the truth is that we would really like, is that a lot of organizations think that that's just a part of the training department, or even something that the project manager is doing on top of their project manager duties. And really, the best way for it to be successful is to have a dedicated arm of the project that is solely focused on change readiness, change management. And that does not just mean putting out a weekly or bi-weekly newsletter and preparing training and one-pagers for the organization. It is a much more holistic role, because at the end of the day, we are changing a system, but we are actually asking individuals to shift and adjust what they're doing and how they're doing it, and to some extent, how they even view and determine themselves to be successful.
So would you see that more as like someone leading an orchestra, like a conductor almost, where they're engaging the different portions of the groups and saying, I need you here now, I need you to come in a little bit, and engaging those groups?
Possibly. Yeah, I never thought about it that way, but that's a great way to visualize what this change manager role is. They, if you were to think about a hierarchy, they are not underneath the project manager. They are same level, working alongside of one another and very closely keeping each other abreast and informed of what's going on in the project. I can use a perfect example that most project managers, at least the ones I've seen, and again, full disclosure, I do come from software, so a lot of it is driven from a software lens. But most project managers, they are focused on the technical side of whatever is happening. They have their project plan. That project plan has a list of 130 plus action items for things like, data dumps, mapping, configuration, testing, UAT, end-to-end, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They're focused on making sure that all of the elements with the technology are ticked off. But even if every single piece of that project plan was green from their perspective, there's this whole other side, which is the people side of it. And not losing sight of that in pursuit of going live with some new endeavor.
So I'm going to build on AJ's metaphor.
Yeah.
So you talked about the conductor and the performance for the music, but what about the rest of all the logistics? You have the marketing, you have the operations, people showing them to the seat. There's a whole other aspect in addition to the guests, and you have to get all that on board too.
Yeah, you're blowing my mind with the way you're thinking about this. And it's actually getting me thinking about it a little bit differently, even from my perspective. But you're right. There are all of these pieces that truly lean and drive towards what we would define as success. But I think really what you're saying there, Steve, is that first and foremost, you have to, for that entire group of people, if you were to do like a mind map of all the impacted stakeholders, right? If you think about that, you have to understand and create a shared definition of success for all of those stakeholders, or else you're falling short and losing sight of each of those components in what creates a memorable performance, right? If we think about it from the orchestra perspective. Yeah, the orchestra and the musicians, they may have been practicing for months, and they know the piece front and back, and they can perform it on a dime. But if no one can get parked in a timely manner, if the process to get into the building and the ticketing requires me to have 12 apps on my phone, you think about all those friction points within any engagement, whether it's a concert that you're going to or the concert of change that you're trying to create within your organization.
So it's more than just getting ready for the dress rehearsal. You want the whole performance to be productive, enjoyable, and ideally producing the monetary results that you are hoping and expecting.
Yeah, you want it to be worthwhile in the end, because these things are not cheap. Even a quote unquote, quick win change that an organization might be going through, it requires, I think the last time I counted, and this was high level, it's like 17 different steps just for that, even if it's quick. So these are not cheap, both from time, money, or resources perspective. So you want to make sure that it's yielding the desired end that you want to see. And it's not, even though you might say, well, it's going live on this new technology. No, that's not the goal. That's the measuring stick, I guess, or that's the point that you're going to measure against. But really the goal is because you as an organization recognize that what you're doing today is not going to help you be able to scale and grow for where you want to go tomorrow. And so having a really clear destination definition and having that agreement across the board is going to ensure that any decision that you make, any scope creep that you introduce, I know AJ's favorite, scope creep, anything that you introduce, you have to really be willing to put put a lens to it and scrutiny and say, is this moving us closer or further away from our goal? That goal not being this new technology, but what the technology is going to allow and make happen.
Yeah, I don't know about scope creep being my favorite. I think my favorite one.
Your favorite topic to talk about.
I like talking about retrospectives. I feel like that's one of my
yeah.
favorite topics. Sorry, Teams is interacting over here. But that's one of my favorite topics to discuss because I feel like we have such a great opportunity for change in a retrospective. We talk about here are our issues, here are the things that went well, here's what didn't go well. We can use this next time to go in and figure out what we're trying to do in the next iteration. But I think people just blow past it and they do well, here's a whole list of stuff, but we don't really talk about getting to the root cause of those changes that need to be implemented to make us better overall, and why we're doing carryover or why we're not doing certain things, why we're just doing the low-hanging fruit, whatever those issues are. But I think change management happens the first place in IT in those retrospectives, and then that should be bubbled up into larger conversations around, does this happen for this one team or is this across the board? Where are we with those things? But keeping a pulse on it.
Yeah, I mean, retrospectives. Why are you harshing my vibe, man? I mean, we just got live. Why do we got to talk about all the things that went wrong or that we could learn from? Why would we do that? We just have, we're just focusing on the horizon where we're going next. But no, I do agree. Retrospectives are actually very valuable, and in fact, they're very valuable as often as you can have them within reason. I do see where retrospectives tend to happen after everybody's really mad. That's usually when a retrospective gets introduced, to be like, okay, well, we have to let everybody air their grievances because there's a certain degree of heightened emotion at that point.
Yeah.
But if you actually have more regular feedback loops within your projects in general, say, every week, every couple weeks, max, I would say, as far as the cycle, you will be able to get more in front of and address whether it's a technical matter or really if it's a people and process matter. You'll be able to tackle that before the proverbial shift hits the fan.
Right. That's beautiful. I think as we go in, having both of those retrospectives at every iteration, and then even doing a post-mortem after that, right? So then now you're talking about change management all the way through from just iteratively, but also at the very end, and it doesn't necessarily have to take away from the success of the project, but it's just talking about, we know we can do this next project better, or this next phase better, or this next release better, whatever that is.
Right.
Post-mortem because someone died.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They literally died. Yeah, they died at the end. Where was I going to go with this? You just said something that made me sorry. No, it's my own fault. Where we were, it'll come to me. Keep going. It'll come to me. I lost my train of thought.
Well, I think this takes us into the next. Right. Way to go, Steve. Way to ruin it.
Mm-hmm.
I have my
But
moments.
I think this takes us into our next segment, which is the hotline. And so let's jump into that real quick, and then we can see if there's any questions that we have for you.
Okay.
Let's eavesdrop on the BA hotline and see what provocative project problems are awaiting us. Is your project in hot water? Operators are standing by. Ooh, that's hot.
I love that so much.
It's one of my favorites as well.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we do have one question out here for you. So it's from Leslie. So how can you get the people who are resistant to trust the change so they feel safe and adopt new ideas or technology?
That is an excellent question, Leslie. Thank you for asking it. Thank you for all of your engagement. I love all your comments. The bottom line, the number one thing to remember when it comes to change is that people don't resist change. They resist being changed. So often, the way resistance manifests is through putting up your hand saying, that won't work. This is going to be a disaster. I can't do X because of Y. First and foremost, the first thing that you can do, like we talked about earlier, is to lean, instead of immediately saying, oh, no, you just don't understand. Here's all the cool things. Here's all the benefits that you're going to get once we go to this new technology. Because doesn't our current technology suck? Don't you want something better? Instead of immediately going to that, first and foremost, lean in, engage them, be curious. Go, that's interesting. What makes you feel that way? And I think just allowing them the space to share their concerns and share them in a couple different ways, because not everybody as an organization, maybe you haven't done the phase 0 change readiness work. And so the level of trust within your organization is maybe a little bit low. How teams interact and collaborate with each other is kind of crummy. And so there might be people who are hesitant to speak up or to raise their hand in some sort of formal town hall type setting. But if you create opportunities, multiple opportunities and multiple mediums where they can share their feelings candidly without fear of judgment, without fear of being told they're wrong, that is number one. That's the first way that you're going to add a couple more ticks in your trustometer meter. Another thing is that, especially with people who appear to be resistant, they're resistant because they're uncertain. They haven't been convinced yet. They haven't had all of their questions answered. And so if, when you are leaning in and having the conversation with them as much as you can, and this is actually where I think analysts have a very unique opportunity and superpower that they can really lean on, is tie the old or tie the current to the future. I've had countless leaders, I'll use that term loosely. I've had countless leaders who I have dealt with in different organizations who, for whatever reason, say, you know what, we don't want to spend any time talking about the present. We just want to focus on the future because that's where we're going. And I would say to those leaders, and I've said it before, that's a terrible idea, because you need to show people how they can connect the dots, because that's how our brains naturally operate. Whenever we're presented with new information, we're immediately thinking about, how does that work today for me? How do I do that today? And so if all you're doing in your trainings, in your demos, in your sprint reviews, whatever you're doing, if all you're doing is talking about the new and in no way setting the stage or creating context or relation to the current, people are going to continue to struggle because they can't, or they might just, because they haven't had as much exposure as you maybe who are in the project have, they just can't see how what they do today, they're going to be able to do it tomorrow. And so if you can just find ways to tie them together, spend time understanding the current. Don't just say, you know what, that was the past, tossing it out, moving on. Because there's actually also a lot of really good things that are happening in the present that you do want to bring along with you and you don't want to lose sight of. But if you can find opportunities to connect, literally, even if you were creating like business process workflows, if you could overlay them together and show, here's the current path and here's what the new path looks like, and show them where there's alignment and maybe a little divergence, but where that divergence actually still aligns with the overall outcome, the value stream that you're trying to achieve. It's not so much how I do it, but it's what I'm trying to do and why. And so don't shortchange the present in service to the future. That would be my biggest recommendation.
And that one of the last questions you just made is one of the things I find most helpful. Is you find somebody with strong opinions. Wow, you feel really strongly about that. Why do you feel that way?
Yeah.
And sit and wait. And a lot of times you will get the floodgates opening and just trying to catch it all.
Yeah. I like to do pulse checks. I know there's different schools of thought with those. One of the reasons I do them is because I actually don't adhere to a very standard change methodology. There's all the different frameworks out there. There's Cotter, there's ProSci, there's McKinsey, there's all these different models. I just like to grab the best of every one of them and kind of put them together. So I don't really follow a set. Like if someone says to me, what's your plan for this change? I'll be like, well, here's the things that we're going to do. I just don't know when we're going to do them, because it's actually going to come up naturally and organically based on how we're seeing this change project moving along. There's certain things we want to ensure that we are doing consistently, and we have certain touch points built in. But to say, it's a list of 135 things and we're going to check them all off, it's kind of like the same move that you would do with a project. Just because it all checked off doesn't mean you're good to go and doesn't mean you're green. Right. So that, I think that that would be my biggest takeaway with that, is asking those questions and also saying, what's on your mind? What hasn't been answered that you are uncertain about? What do you think that we're not considering? Asking questions like that can create really great opportunities to get some, hopefully, pretty honest and candid feedback. And then the most important part is that you then act upon it. You respond, you provide that feedback. So it's not just a one-way communication. It's a you asked, we listened, and here's how we're addressing it.
I had a question.
Yes, Leslie, it's definitely therapy a little bit. You're a change manager / bartender / therapist, 100%.
Bartender. Yeah.
I had a question on your first point when you were talking about what you would do to help bridge that gap between resistance and somebody else that wants change. But you mentioned getting different various mediums of feedback. So having a way of gathering that from either surveys or interviews or however. Have you had issues or run into scenarios where you would ask for feedback and then there were people that just didn't do any sort of follow-up? And how did that affect your ability to build trust with that organization or that person?
You mean as it relates to like they gave it and then they went, well, that was nice, we're just going to tuck that in the drawer?
Or just never did anything with it? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm Polish and I'm pretty stubborn in that regard. So I don't usually let it lie. That's one of the early things that we talk about when we think about how we're going to put this stuff out there. But more importantly, what are we going to do with the information that we get back, and try to come up with a pretty structured but loose, right? Structured but flexible way to then address them, because it can then be addressed in a variety of different ways. It can be addressed through, we have regular change ambassador coaching calls. So if you are part of this change ambassador network, we meet every week and we talk about the latest stuff that is happening in the project, the latest, if it's like a configuration change or a new feature set or something from a technology standpoint, or maybe a new process decision that has been made or that we want their feedback on. But we also spend time looking at and reviewing the feedback that we've received. And from there, we collaboratively decide and agree on, okay, how do we want to respond to this, and in what way? Is this appropriate to put as to add to our FAQ that we have built? Is this appropriate to address as a topic in our newsletter? Do we want to create a short video on it? Is it something that we want our executive sponsor to address in the next town hall, or whatever it might be? It depends on the intensity, the severity, the impact of that question, and where we think is the right way to deliver it. But there's no one single way to get the information coming in, as well as to then send the information out.
But it sounds like to me what you're saying is it's important then to answer the feedback and make sure that you are at least acknowledging and addressing it. Is that accurate?
Yep. Okay. Yes. Be a human. Do human things with other humans. Yes. We don't communicate in just one way. We don't collaborate in just one way. Treat it as a human endeavor.
And
I found the same thing.
Go ahead,
Steve. I found the same thing when we were talking about building trust and asking for feedback. If we have scenarios where you ask everybody for feedback, but then you never do anything with it, and it goes into, a bucket, but basically the suggestion box is really just the trash can,
Yes.
And then if that's the case, then you'll find that I think build more resentment in those individuals, because now they hate not only the whatever suggestion of change that you're offering, but also the process, and maybe you even for just, I gave you my thoughts, I gave you this because I wanted to be invested, and then you overlooked me for this particular idea, or and then they just stop engaging overall.
Yeah, I think one thing to that end, and this is going to sound terrible when it comes out, but I hope you get the context of what I'm
I'll have to
trying to say
record it.
here. I think, yeah. But I would say one of the really important things, either as a business analyst, a project manager, the change manager, whatever it is, do not get caught up in hero mode. I think that's the big thing. Change is not a one person endeavor. And yet I think so often, especially people who do tend to be analysts or fall into this change box, we're pragmatic people. We dig into the details. We want to help find the solutions. And so we take it on. We're like the savior. Let me fix it for you, as opposed to making it something that is a shared objective and shared ownership. And that's why I was saying it's going to sound bad, because then it's like, well, it's not you that screwed up, it's kind of everybody. But the truth is that if it's all on one person to both be the receiver of the feedback and then the communicator of it back, that's where you can get stuck in a tricky situation, especially if you don't necessarily have the power or the autonomy to do that regularly. Let's say leadership's like, yeah, transparency, but not really,
Right.
So that's where you can get a bad stamp on your head and develop a reputation of someone who said nice things but didn't actually follow through. Whereas if you are a collective network of people who are sharing both sharing the responsibility both for intake and broadcast, then that way there's less chance of it happening because someone's going to talk. But also it doesn't become like AJ wronged me or AJ lied to me.
Which I've done both of. So, yeah.
Well, we all have.
Yeah.
We're human.
Yeah, I mean, it's why you're on the show, actually. It was just because I
had something on you? No.
Yeah. That manila folder, can I have that back, please, now? Thank you.
I'll see.
It's locked up.
I'll see how it goes.
So as far as being human, one of the things that I've found is helpful is working with that difficult person or people, getting their whatever their input was, and basically letting them look at what I have for notes and say, I want to make sure that this represents what you're telling me, what you're experiencing.
Yeah.
Now, we just spent 30 minutes. I can't transcribe the entire thing, but if you can help me distill it, I still want it to be accurate and a reflection of what you said. So help me.
Mm-hmm. I would also say make them co-captains of their destiny in that regard. I think so often when you are asking for feedback, one of the things that I like to include in our various feedback methods and our pulse checks specifically, like what would you need to know or what would you need to see in order to have this question addressed, in order to have this problem solved? What would you be looking for? So that way they become co-conspirators in what's next. Co-conspirators in a positive way. Conspire actually is a positive word. It just has gotten construed over the years, but conspiracy is people, two or more people working together in pursuit of a greater goal. So that's
I'm with
Congress.
Yeah. So
I think most words that have con in them are not necessarily towards a positive goal.
Mm-hmm.
Like con queso, it's without queso, and like it's
That's
the worst.
true.
Yeah, always add queso.
No, it's
with
queso.
Con queso.
With queso. Sin queso.
Oh, see?
Oh man, I'm wrong. Oh,
see, when it's English, con is not so good.
Yeah.
Spanish,
so,
okay, well, we can go with con.
But
right,
yes,
well,
that way they drive it.
Sorry.
They drive the solution as well. And it's not, I was told this, or this is the answer that came down from on high. It's like, this is what we came up with together.
Absolutely.
Well, that takes us then to our next segment, VA Confession. So we'll get to talk a little bit about change management that may not have worked.
Uh-huh.
And now it's time for BA Confessions.
All right. So I'm sure that since you've been doing this for a little bit, then you may have had situations where change management started out well intended, I think you said, and then didn't necessarily end up that way. So do you
Mhm.
have any scenarios that you'd be willing to share to say, I've been in this business, I've seen when it happens, and when shift hit the fan, it went everywhere?
I will give two examples.
Okay.
The first one is probably the more common one, which is change management is a thing that's done later in the project. That's something that unfortunately I hear often, and I'm working on my sales counter pitch with that when I do have conversations with certain leaders in various industries. But it's yeah. You know what? That people part, that change part's important, but about 8 weeks before we're about to go live.
Oh, yeah.
That's kind of I mean, I think if we all said when does the change person usually show up? About 8 weeks, about 8 to 10 weeks before you're supposed to go live. And that is it's not a recipe for disaster. I'm not going to say it's not going to go well. It's just not going to go as well as it could have had you actually engaged with change earlier or even before the project starts.
Right.
Because a lot of the activities that happen in that 8 to 10 weeks before you go live are the usual change management methodology task checkboxes. It's getting the training materials together. It's coordinating the training schedule. It's maybe starting to have a newsletter or letting
Okay.
people know, hey, guess what? This thing's happening. You want to come see a little bit of it? You want to get a sneak preview of it? That's usually those things, and I tend to call them change theater. It's not going to hurt, but it's not necessarily going to ensure the level of success and adoption that you want had you engaged with your business and your stakeholders a lot sooner. Because I also like to remind people, they're like, well, now it's time to talk about the change. I'm like, heads up, they've been talking about the change. They've been creating their own narrative
Mm-hmm.
from before this change kicked off. They already have established their own opinions and ideas of how it's going or how it's going to go, because you were not the one getting in front of and being the primary broadcaster and communicator of the change. You were leaving it to gossip and rumor and secondhand opinions. So I would say that's the most common one. I think the other is where change started off well. There was a very concerted effort for it. And this was one client that I worked with last year where they didn't start at the beginning, but they started, I would say, a good 6 to 8 months out, which I thought was very, very smart of them.
Yep.
The person that they had who was overseeing it, she was lovely. And from the client perspective, she had a very marketing mind. And so she did a lot of the things that you want to do that on the outside can feel a little bit performative, but actually create a lot of rallying around and excitement about the change. They had a contest, where they named the project. They came up with a fun logo. She created all this really neat stuff to help keep excitement going and started the communication about the change very early. However, that was not her full-time job.
Got it.
So she did this work, but she was also wearing the hat to a certain extent of the project manager and the operational director.
Oh, wow.
So she was the person who
Wow.
was overseeing the project from a project perspective. She was also one of the primary people who was being consulted on for any configuration, implementation, operational insights or changes. So as the project went on, her ability to do those things just kept getting more and more constrained. And so
Gotcha.
because of that, those really great things that she started off doing, she still did, but a little bit less and with a little less detail. And it was more of like, well, okay, we'll get to that after we do this, as opposed to it being its own separate initiative, track, and person leading it on the organization. So those are two that I would say too late, gangbusters, but too many hats. Those are probably my two.
Makes sense. Totally.
Yeah. It's always fun when a company decides they're going to save resources and make the SME become the BA. Oh, you already know everything, so you get to just do it.
Yeah.
It's not how it should work.
Yeah, I mean, there's many. That's another great example of what not to do. And I always like to use the analogy of just because you know how to drive a car really well doesn't mean you have the knowledge or skill set of how to build one from scratch. Those two things, those two levels of intelligence and knowledge are not they don't overlap each other necessarily. And yet that's how we so often, when we assemble our project teams and our decision makers and our stakeholders, we think about, well, let's get the person who knows the process best or who knows the system best. Let's bring them in and ask them to design something completely new when they've never had to think about why they do things or how to actually build a new car.
But they still have the regular job too.
And they also still have their regular job. Yes.
They're doing this on top of their real job. Just love hearing that.
Yeah. Ideally, don't do that. Ideally, have a dedicated team of at least a couple people. Ideally, like depending upon the breadth and depth of the project, you want to at least have a bare minimum people that are full time, like about 5. But we can get into that separately. That's a resourcing conversation for another day.
Staffing conversation, right?
Yes.
Full circle. Well, Amy,
we call it talent acquisition. It's not staffing.
Well, thank you so much for being here. I know you have a few things coming up that you are working on, and so you've got keynotes that you are doing. You want to talk a little bit about like your keynotes, your webinar, your workshop, and how people can find you?
Yeah, absolutely. With the Ultra Lounge music underneath. Yeah, so I have a keynote coming up next week to help kick off a really big change initiative for a global staffing firm. I'm really excited about. We're just helping prepare their leaders and learners for change so they can lead the change to each of their respective teams. As well as I have a webinar coming up at the end of the month that is all about this idea of change readiness and this phase 0 work to help you be in a better position to help prepare your people and your processes to effectively execute and drive meaningful change. And then I'm so excited to be doing some keynotes and a few workshops as well for the place where we all came together for the first time, which is PMBA, their fall conferences in Boston and Vancouver, and maybe hopefully a few others too in the future.
Wonderful. I think you'll have a blast on both those locations. They're both beautiful. And I can't say enough positive things about Vancouver in the fall time. Oh, it's just absolutely gorgeous. So you'll love it. And I'm sure that everyone will love your sessions. You do a fantastic job. So thank you so much again for being on our show. This has been a lot of fun and a very quick hour. Seems like just flew right through. So thank you everybody that showed up. We appreciate you and your attendance. And just if you have any questions, feel free to follow us on LinkedIn, YouTube. Check out our website and submit your own submissions for either confessions. If you want to be a guest, you can do that as well. And this is Analysts After Dark. Both Steve and I wishing you a great evening and reminding you to stay curious
and stay positive.
Thank you very much.